History often feels inevitable. When we look back at powerful nations, empires, and global superpowers, it is easy to believe they were always destined to exist, that their rise was written into the fabric of time. But history is fragile, and sometimes the future of the world hangs by a single thread. The United States of America, one of the most influential nations in human history, was never guaranteed to exist. In fact, there was a moment when America came dangerously close to disappearing before it was even born. This is that story. In the year 1776, there was no United States, no Constitution, no White House, no global power stretching from coast to coast. Instead, there were 13 small colonies pressed against the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. They were poor, they were divided, and they were facing the greatest empire the world had ever known. Great Britain ruled the seas. Its army was professional, disciplined, and battle-hardened. Its navy dominated every major ocean. Its king commanded vast wealth and global influence. The colonies, by comparison, had almost nothing. Most of their soldiers were farmers, laborers, and shopkeepers. They lacked uniforms, weapons, training, and sometimes even shoes. Many of them had never fired a musket before joining the fight. Yet somehow, these colonies had chosen to rebel. They declared independence from the British Crown, knowing full well what that meant. If they failed, they would not be forgiven. They would be crushed. The American Revolution began with bold words and brave ideals: liberty, self-government, freedom from tyranny. But ideals alone do not win wars. By the end of 1776, the revolution was collapsing. British forces had driven the Continental Army out of New York. Defeat followed defeat. Desertions became common. Winter was approaching, and morale was at its lowest point. Many soldiers had signed up for only 1 year. When those enlistments expired, they were free to go home, and many planned to do exactly that. The dream of independence was fading. Some colonists began to doubt the rebellion. Others openly supported the British, believing resistance was hopeless. Even within the Continental Congress, confidence was breaking. The revolution was dying, quietly, slowly, and painfully. At the center of this storm stood George Washington. He was tall, calm, and deeply aware of the impossible task he faced. He was not a brilliant tactician by European standards. He had already lost several key battles. And yet, Washington understood something many others did not. This war would not be won by perfect victories. It would be won by survival. As long as the army existed, the idea of America lived. But if the army collapsed, so would the revolution. By December, Washington's army had retreated across the Delaware River into Pennsylvania. The men were starving, freezing. Many wrapped their feet in rags because they had no boots. British commanders believed the war was effectively over. They settled into winter quarters, confident that spring would bring the final victory. America, it seemed, was finished. And that is when Washington made a decision that would change history. On Christmas night, 1776, Washington gathered what remained of his army. The plan was simple and insane. They would cross the ice-choked Delaware River in the dead of night. They would march through a winter storm, and they would launch a surprise attack on British forces stationed in Trenton, New Jersey. The risks were overwhelming. If the crossing failed, men would drown. If the attack failed, the army would be destroyed. If word leaked, British reinforcements would crush them. Many officers doubted the plan. Some believed it was suicide, but Washington knew he had no choice. Doing nothing meant certain defeat. Action, however dangerous, offered one last chance. The night was bitterly cold. Ice filled the river. Snow whipped through the air. Men struggled to keep their muskets dry as they crossed in small boats. Some soldiers collapsed from exhaustion before even reaching land. Others marched on, driven by desperation rather than hope. At dawn, they reached Trenton. What followed was not a grand, cinematic battle, but it was decisive. The British garrison, caught completely off guard, surrendered. The victory was small in scale but enormous in meaning. For the first time in months, the Continental Army had won. That single moment changed everything. News of the victory spread quickly through the colonies. It reignited belief in the revolution. Soldiers re-enlisted, volunteers returned, civilians began supporting the cause again. Foreign powers watching from afar took notice. Perhaps this rebellion was not doomed after all. Perhaps the colonies had a chance. History often focuses on grand speeches and famous documents, But sometimes the fate of nations turns on cold nights, desperate choices, and fragile hope. The crossing of the Delaware was not the end of the war, but it was the moment America survived. Without it, the revolution might have collapsed completely. There would have been no independence, no United States, no American experiment in democracy, just another failed rebellion, forgotten by time. The story of America's birth is not a tale of certainty. It is a story of near failure, a story of men who doubted, feared, and struggled, yet acted anyway. It reminds us that history is not built by destiny alone, but by decisions made when everything seems lost. And it leaves us with a haunting question. If that night had gone differently, if the river had been impassable, if the attack had failed, would America exist today? This is ChronoStories, true history, told through stories.